Hey guys, this is a little uncomfortable, but I'm sure that's what everybody is feeling. But if I look a little awkward, just bear with me. But for my preceptorship, I was at the Stevens County Emergency Department, which I was happy that I got an emergency department because that's where I feel called. But my preceptor is Gloria. She's amazing. I love being with her. Originally, I was actually supposed to have a different preceptor. I was supposed to be on day shift, but she ended up having like a new nurse or something. So she's like, I can't take a student. So I got moved to Gloria. And so I highly recommend her. But she's a really good nurse. She's been at Stevens County for, I think she said, either like 20 plus or like 30 years. She's been there a while. But it was definitely a challenge getting used to like the night shift. I mean, I do work well at night, but for example, she works every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so like it was nice that she had a set schedule, but also at the same time, I was kind of like Friday and Saturday, I don't necessarily want to be working at my preceptorship. So a lot of times I did end up working on Thursday nights, which was hard because we'd have classes all day Thursday, and then I would go back, put my stuff down, kind of like relax for a second, then I'll go eat dinner and then have to get ready for preceptorship for a 12-hour shift. So it did kind of make it tiring. And then I did realize that I was not used to the night shift schedule, and like, because I kind of couldn't be because of like classes during the day. So I think after my preceptorship, the most amount of sleep I got was about 4.5 hours. And then I was like, whoa, I don't have anything else like technically to do because it's like a Friday and I have today off. But I wouldn't even nap during the day because most of the time I just fit to everybody else's schedule. So I definitely did lose some sleep, but I honestly found a better time. Like I had a better time staying awake and was more focused in the 12-hour clinical at night than like a day 8-hour clinical like on a Wednesday. And I do believe that's because even though like med surg is important, like that's not my thing, and I've quickly found that out that like I could not be in a med surg floor for very long. Like if I needed to, like I could do it, but I couldn't stay there long. And I know it is beneficial, you definitely learn stuff, and especially about like med administration and assessments, like it's very important, but I just know it wasn't for me. So like 8-hour clinical days seem to drag on longer than these 12-hour shifts. But overall, it was definitely a good experience. The night shift nurses were really welcoming to me, and like if they had assignments and like skills that could be done, they would be quick to be like, hey Teresa, you want to go like join me? Because Gloria is a charge nurse, and so she wouldn't always necessarily have as many patients, but she did take patients. That's just how they work. Like charge nurses also took patients there, and they kind of split it up, and she did a good job about like being one of the equals and like helping them at anything they needed. But she did sometimes have less patients, so I would help out with the other nurses or the techs if they needed it. And so it was definitely cool because I definitely, like they used to kind of like jank on the day shift nurses and were like, yeah, you want to be with us, like we're more fun. And just from the vibes I got, like I am glad I got a night shift because I enjoyed all of them. But I got to do skills like I got to place IVs. I'm not sure how many, but they always, like, if they had IV, they're like, Teresa, you want to try this? I mean, there were some patients that, like, or, like, if it was kids or something, I was like, I don't know. There were some patients that, or, like, if they were really hard sick, like, there was one patient I was so glad I didn't try, which, I mean, I would have felt better afterwards, but this one poor lady, she had a history of taking, like, vancomycin and a lot of health issues, and so they probably stuck her at least, I would say, like 8 to 10 times, and they couldn't get a vein. So finally they went in the foot, but they just could not get a vein because even if they got like a backflash, then a lot of times her veins would they would what's it called, they would like blow. Oh yeah, they would blow. And so I was kind of glad I didn't try on her, but at the same time, I mean, like nobody could get a vein, so I mean, I wouldn't have taken that personally. But I also got to I got to place a Foley catheter, which and med surg, like I've been able to remove them, and then like in past clinicals I'd done straight cats, but I'd never done a Foley catheter. So that was cool that Gloria got to give me that chance to do it, and she taught me through the whole thing, and she was really good about like encouraging me in all the skills I did and like being there. Like she wouldn't even, I mean, like if I needed help, she would help me, but like she was like, you got it. And then afterwards, like if there was something she saw that like she would have done different, I mean, unless it like interfered with the safety, then afterwards she would wait, and then like when we were outside the patient's room or outside away from people, then she'd be like, Teresa, now I would have probably done this different, or just remember this. And so it was good because she would correct me, but at the same time, like she wasn't like embarrassing me in front of anybody. But she was like close to watch me the whole time. And so I got to pass meds, obviously. I got to give injections, and she was also, Gloria had me like making sure I worked on like my patient communication and like knowing what meds I was giving and like why I was giving it and explaining it to the patient. And she even had me, like if a patient was being discharged, like she was busy one time, she's like, here, will you explain, make sure you hit this point, this point, this point, and discharge teaching. And so that was cool that I got to do that, and I got to watch her do plenty of like admittant assessments and like questions. And so I got to see that. She let me chart. She showed me like their charting system, and she let me chart. I also got to see, I can't remember what it was called. They called it like a flower catheter or something, which I'd never even heard of. But basically with this patient, he had a hard time, if he used a Foley catheter, then he had a hard time coming off of it and like voiding himself and his continence level. And so they tried using this one that basically it has these stickies that's almost like a flower, and it comes over and it's supposed to like attach and stay, but it didn't end up attaching, and so it wasn't successful, but I got to see it, so that was interesting because I'd never seen that before. Let's see. I did notice, like, for some things that, because I think even in our process of change, like, we talked about it, their scanners were not working, or, like, they're really faulty, and so a lot of times the nurses wouldn't even bother, like, bringing in the scanners in the patient's room, and I wouldn't see them, like, scanning bracelets. They wouldn't scan medications, and I did notice, because of that, there wasn't as much, like, asking the patient identifiers, and so, like, there wouldn't be as much like, hey, can you tell me your name, your date of birth? And as we've talked about in the past, like that is risk for medication error. So that is just one thing that I know is like probably one of the only things that I'd be like, oh, that kind of like, whoa, we shouldn't be doing that. And so we talked about that in our process of change if you watched that presentation. But like I said, overall it was a good experience for some of my patients. The first patient that will probably stick with me is we had this mental health patient come in, and he came in at probably around 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight, and he came in naked because he was running outside around his house naked, and so they basically brought him in because like he was a nuisance, and they said he was a suicide risk, and he was definitely like a lot of work, and it definitely made me appreciate the nurses because they handled him very well. But since he came in naked, he was probably 400 plus pounds, and so like we didn't have any like adult diapers or briefs big enough for him, and so we just had to cover him with a sheet. But he was very non-compliant, so he kept like taking his sheet off the whole shift. Like he kept just getting naked, and then like he kept standing up and getting out of bed, which also he was a fall risk because he had cellulitis. And so we had talked about with the nurses, we're like, if this man falls, like we're not going to be able to get him up. And then we had found he had actually caused 2 of like staff members or health workers in the past to be on workers' comp because they got hurt trying to like help him and aid him. So he was definitely a patient. Like he was all night long. Like he probably slept maybe 2-3 hours. I would say 2 hours tops. And so he was definitely a difficult patient, but the nurses did a really good job of like at the end, like the last hour, we literally just stayed at his bedside until the new nurses came on because he was just being non-compliant. And then another patient that I remember, she was a sweet old lady. She had actually suffered a hip fracture. I believe she was like 81, and she, I was talking to her a lot because she was just in a lot of pain, so I was trying to like distract her, but she also had like Alzheimer's, and so she had told me, she's like, basically, she had told me this one time that I'll never forget. She was like, let me tell you, she's like, don't listen to these people and you do what you want to do. She's like, these men, she's like, they'll try to get you to do things that you don't want to do, but she's like, don't do it. She's like, do what you want to do. And then after I was talking to her being so nice, she's like, can I tell you something? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, why are you so mean and won't let me go home? And she switched like that. Like I was like, but it kind of taught me, I was like, okay, this patient, like she has Alzheimer's, she has dementia, she isn't right all the way there. And so like I didn't take it personally, and it was kind of like a learning lesson for that, dealing with those kind of patients, because even though like I was being so nice to her, and like while she was sitting in pain, like I was just in her room because I didn't have anything else to do, so I was just trying to talk to her, distract her, and she still was like, you're being mean, you won't let me go home. And I was trying to explain to her that we're doing that for her health, but it was just kind of, it was also funny though. I was like, all right, because I was expecting her to be like, you're so nice, and then when she's like, you're mean, I was like, all right, say less. But it was funny and it was a good experience. But yeah, so overall I would say my preceptorship experience was good, and I learned stuff, and I definitely was glad I got to do it. And I might not have been looking forward to the 12-hour shifts, but I honestly I looked forward to it every week, and I was sad when this whole thing happened. And I even texted my preceptor and was like, oh, I miss you. And she's like, I was gonna text you too. She's like, I've just been so busy. But she told me how she missed me, and it honestly kind of made me sad, because I did enjoy it, because I felt like I was part of their team. So yeah, that was my experience.